Now, one of the things I promised I would get to here is Big Beautiful Bill and what it relates to in terms of automotive purchases. And there's actually quite a lot of stuff going on here. And a lot of them have some little asterisks next to them. And they need some explanation and some additional analysis. And hat tip to Motor Trend, specifically Scott Evans from Motor Trend, for putting together a great list of everything that's automotive in that bill. And first of all is no tax on car loan interest. And there's a really big caveat here, because no tax on car loan interest, that sounds like a very good thing. And in many ways, I think that will be a positive. This is a good thing. But if you're a new car buyer and you're expecting no tax on that new car interest, there's a lot of caveats you have to be aware of. First of which is that, and the big one, is that the car needs to be made in the United States. It legitimately has to be assembled, at least, in the United States. And that's going to confuse a lot of people, because they're going to buy a Ford or a Chevy and go, yeah, I bought an American car. I hate to break it to you, your Ford or Chevy was probably made in Mexico, so it doesn't qualify. Then you get someone who's not expecting it, who's buying a Toyota. Oh, I'm probably not going to get that. I bought a Japanese car. No, actually, your Toyota was made in the United States. Surprise. Yeah. Now, some Toyotas are also made in Mexico, and some are made all over the place. But and some are genuinely made in Japan still. But having said that, the car has to be made in the U.S. It also can't weigh more than 14,000 pounds. So that rules out things like your Ford F-350s, even if it's not. I'm assuming they're doing that to rule out commercial vehicles, but a lot of people buy F-350s for non-commercial purposes. That rules that out. Now, here's the thing. They do say commercial vehicles, here another caveat, commercial vehicles qualify. So if you buy a box truck, it's a commercial vehicle, right? No, but only if you use it for personal use. You can't use it for a business. So that's relevant, though, if you are buying perhaps a vehicle for your small business and you're wanting to claim some other small business tax deductions. Well, know that if you do that, you're not going to qualify for the no tax on the interest on this. I mean, there's so much stuff here. I think you need a CPA just to figure out this one thing here. And don't get me started on the fact that the tax deduction's capped at $10,000. Also, if you make more than $100,000 a year as an individual or $200,000 joint, the amount of interest that you're able to deduct goes down by $200 for every additional $1,000 over that income threshold you make. So again, if you're scratching your head going, what? You know what? This is one of those things that there's so many hoops on it. It does kind of make me wonder, and granted, these hoops probably got put in there. The original intention of this probably didn't have these hoops, but I mean, these bills have to go through so many different stages, and the House and then the Senate, and then they got to get this added, and then they change this, and then they do that, and then finally it makes it to the president's desk to sign. And it's probably a far cry from the original intention that went in with this, which was to reduce the tax on the loans, on interest on the loans and stuff. So the other thing here that's a big thing, EV tax credits. Those are set to end September 30th. And that's the up to $7,500 federal tax credit for new and used EVs. And that does expire again, September 30th of this year. Previously, those tax credits were slated to expire in 2032. Now it's this year. Also, another tax credit on an adjacent note is for installing an EV charger or renewable fuel dispenser at your home. That, they say, is going to expire even sooner on July 30th of this year. Also, I want to know more about these renewable fuel dispensers. It says EV charger of renewable fuel dispensers. I'm not familiar with that. Is that like if you are making your own ethanol at home and you have a still and you're distilling ethanol? You're not making moonshine to drink it, but you might be making moonshine to put in your car. Does that count as renewable fuel? I think it does. But so I guess if you've got a still at home that you're using to make ethanol fuel for your car, that tax credit, if you had it, will expire at the end of the year. Also, there is going to be no penalties. This is a big one for cafe violations. What is cafe violations? So cafe, you've probably heard this term. It's not cafe like a place you'd go to drink some coffee, which I've got right here. Hang on. But it is corporate average fuel economy program. And that essentially, what it does is it is the thing that requires manufacturers to have a certain average fuel economy across their line. So if you're going to have a Corvette with a V8 and it's supercharged and it guzzles a ton of fuel, think the new ZR1 burns a ton of fuel, then you have to offset that lower fuel mileage vehicle in your fleet with another vehicle that is particularly fuel efficient, so a hybrid or something. So it's to try to offset this. Well, there's fines if you don't do this. And what this does is it doesn't get rid of CAFE. In fact, the bill did not have the authority necessarily to completely get rid of the CAFE standards. What they did instead, and this is kind of sneaky, is because the bill, by the way, was relating to fiscal things, all of this had to relate to money in one way or another. So they said, oh, well, let's make the penalties $0. So we can't get rid of it, but we can make the penalties $0. So you can just stack up penalties and it doesn't cost you anything. So that is presumably what they're going to do. That means automakers are going to be free to ignore those fuel economy regulations and that the EPA can't enforce them. And I think, people say, oh my God, the EPA can't enforce it. This is terrible. Oh, we're going to have gas guzzlers here and there. I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, I think this is going to be a step forward. And for the reason for that is to have less government involvement and reduce this. This is a good step in both reducing the size of government, but also letting consumers dictate what they actually want. And people are already saying, oh my God, these fuel efficient cars are just going to go away. And that's not going to be the case because people have been wanting fuel efficient cars for a long time. I mean, a really long time at this point. And you want your Toyota Prius, you want your hybrid, heck, you even want your EV for whatever reason that is. And you want that EV. People are going to buy it. There's going to be a demand for that. I don't think this is going to hurt fuel efficient cars in general. And not to mention the fact that even with this, most manufacturers are making their cars now for the global market, right? They're making it for Europe and Asia and stuff. So I don't think this is necessarily going to change a lot. It's just going to remove some government bloat on our end. So, hey, you're listening to the Automotive ADHD Show. We're going to keep talking about this and more after the break.
This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
So before the break, I was talking a little bit about the big, beautiful bill and how it relates to you and me as car owners, perhaps even as automotive enthusiasts. And there are a few other things. Before the break, I was talking about how they are going to be doing away with the CAFE violations, specifically the fines. They can't get rid of the CAFE regulations themselves, but they can make the fines $0. So that is going to happen. And I was making the point as we were going to break of how this really won't change things all that much for people, especially for the naysayers saying that, oh my God, we're going to go back to pre-1970s. Cars are going to get 5 miles to the gallon. It's not going to happen. That is not true. It's not going to happen at all. And I wanted to elaborate more on that reasoning. I think really the key part is the fact that, for one, fuel prices aren't going back to pre-OPEC oil prices, OPEC oil crisis prices, I should say. They're not going back to that. When we saw cars that got 5 miles to the gallon, gas was a few cents a gallon practically, right? We're not going back to that in terms of fuel prices, so we're not going to see manufacturers suddenly throw fuel economy to the wind and just make cars that are horribly, grossly inefficient. That's not going to happen. And that's because the fuel prices are generally going to stay where they're at. There is speculation that some of the other things in the big, beautiful bill could result in those prices slowly trickling down, but there's such a global economy for fuel and oil right now that it will probably be a minor reduction in price at the pump if we do see one. But, to the fuel economy point, gas prices are going to stay relatively the same. No one's going to suddenly want a truck that gets 2 miles to the gallon or a car that gets 7 miles to the gallon. That's not going to happen. And then the other point that I wanted to make was the national market, the international market, I should say, for automobiles, because Ford is selling in Europe. Ford is selling in all these different places. Chevy's selling here. Japan is selling in Japan and then in the US. Like there's all these other countries, and manufacturers aren't making dedicated versions of every single car for every single market. And if they have to, they're usually changing minor things like certain turn signal requirements and side markers and things like that. They're not changing entire drivetrains. It doesn't make sense fiscally to do that. So again, to the naysayer saying that we are going to see, and I've seen this already on social media and online, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. Cars are going to get, no, that nothing's going to change. Literally nothing is going to change for the worse with this. If anything, again, we're just removing a lot of bloat in the bureaucratic system above it. And for that, I think it will be a good thing in the long run. But, and to that fact too, that consumers do want fuel efficient cars. We're pretty used to them now. We're pretty used to getting 20 plus miles to the gallon, 30 plus. If you own a Prius or a hybrid, you're getting 35, 40, 45, 50. I mean, you're getting some crazy gas mileage. A buddy of mine actually just bought a hybrid Toyota Corolla, 2025 hybrid Corolla. And I think it's amazing gas mileage. It's like a Prius, but in Corolla form. And I think it's fantastic. So, more power to you. Buy what works for your use case scenario, even if that's an EV. I'm giving the camera some side eye. But anyway, even if that's an EV, buy what works for your use case scenario. So, anyway, that kind of encompasses some of the important key points here, automotive related, at least within the bill. And will we see some more stuff come out afterwards? Will we see more as people dig into the bill more? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. Overall, there's not going to be a tremendous automotive impact from the bill. The big key thing, I think, too, that a lot of people are talking about, again, either is that fuel economy requirement or the EV tax credit. With the federal EV tax credit going away, Colorado will probably, because Colorado is the state that it will probably up the state tax credit. I imagine California would do the same. So, you'll see some of these states that have been very pro EV come in and probably fill that void for some people who want to buy EVs with the tax credits. Though, if you've listened to the show for any duration of time, you know my opinion on those tax credits and on those subsidies. I've heard people arguing that, well, if we get rid of the tax credits, no one's going to want to buy the EVs. That just made my argument right there. If no one wants to buy the product without it being subsidized, doesn't that mean that we have a fundamental issue with that product, that it's not complete, it's not ready? If you have to, in order for people to like it, you have to subsidize it. We should make the product shine on its own. That's what should happen. I want to see awesome EVs. I do. I want to see cool stuff. I'm optimistic about the Slate EV pickup truck, which is a cheap, no frills, base model pickup truck. It's an EV, but it is truly a small truck. It's the size. It's only like an inch or two bigger than the original Ford, Ranger, which was a small truck at one time. It was, believe it or not. I'm very optimistic about that. And I think, if manufacturers can make EVs in a way that's desirable, that appeals to the American public in a variety of ways, because the American public is a big thing in general. I mean, one of the things I learned is fascinating when I went to Japan. Japan has a very centralized type of society. They have a very central cultural identity, if that makes sense. They are all Japanese and they all share in this cultural identity, and they all sort of live the same sort of lifestyle. They all cram themselves into these big cities. And of course, you get the people living out in the countryside. When I went through the countryside and in the mountains of Yamanashi Prefecture, that was some of my favorite territory in Japan, and the people were so friendly. And I did go to Sportsland Yamanashi, the racetrack there, and I'm going to post some stuff. I did some videos out there, actually, that aren't posted yet, and I'm going to put those up on social media here in the coming weeks. So it should be pretty fun. You should look forward to that. But, generally speaking, there's a cultural identity that is shared. In the United States, we don't necessarily have that sort of cultural identity because, for one, we're such a big country. Japan, for example, is the size landmass-wise of California, right? And they've also been around for many, many, many hundreds of years longer than the United States. The United States, we're a big country. We're in different states. Those states geographically have lots of different terrain features. You've got people by the ocean. You got people in the mountains. You got people in the desert. You've got people in the plains. You've got people in whatever Kansas is, which is that plains or is that just void space? I'm not sure. But my point being, is the United States, it's big. It's really big. And when I've talked to people from Europe too, for example, they don't get this. Like, what do you mean, you can drive 5 or 6 hours and not have and run into anybody? Well, yeah, you truly can. You can drive 5 or 6 hours and be in the same state. In much of Europe, you drive 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. You've traveled through like 3 countries. And really, you have to treat European countries and things like in the EU, for example, with treat them almost as if they are states in a way, even though they're not. And they are independently governed, but as independent as you can be in the EU. But the fact is, and again, tying this back into cars, is there's so much diversity in use cases here in the US. You have the guy commuting on the train in New York City all the way to someone in, suburban Illinois. And then you got someone in, rural Colorado. And then you got the farmer or the rancher in Texas or whatever, right? You have a wide spread of people. And as a result, you have a wide spread of use cases. And that's what I want to see. That's what I want to see the EV market cater to. I want to see cool EVs that actually appeal not to just the tech bros in California or the executives in New York and whatever. I want to see EVs that appeal to some of these more niche cases. And that Slate EV truck definitely does do that. So looping that back into my discussion again with the federal subsidy for EVs going away. And the criticism again is that, well, if we do this, EV sales will go down. People won't want to buy EVs. Okay, well, make the EVs better. And if people don't want to buy the EVs, why is that necessarily a problem? There's this notion that, people don't want to buy the EVs. That's a huge problem. Why? I just mentioned my buddy's 2025 hybrid Corolla that gets a ton of amazing fuel economy. And when you think about the manufacturing methods to making that hybrid, for example, they're fantastic. I mean, they have created Toyota has created a manufacturing process with peak efficiency, both in terms of the material development, the manufacturing of those materials, the logistics to bringing parts in, the batteries, the motors, the engine, like all of this stuff that goes into this. I mean, it is an engineering marvel. And I don't understand why about 50% of the population just kind of puts hybrids and gas cars to the side of, those are old dinosaurs. We got to get away from that. When in reality, we are at the pinnacle of engineering and development with internal combustion, which actually really should be shame on me. Shame on me. I rarely do that. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. I'm your host, Matt West, of course, and you can catch this show on the radio all across southern Colorado from my flagship station, AM 1460 The Answer in Colorado Springs, but as well as 100.7 The Word, 91.7 KLZR, and of course online. And what just happened? Well, before the news break, we had a technical glitch. My bumper music didn't play, and I would like to think that I am a professional. I am a seasoned broadcast professional who keeps a perfect eye on his timing between each of the segments. No, in reality, I sort of just talk until I hear the bumper music, and I did not hear the bumper music because it did not play. And it also didn't play coming into the show here because we're having some glitches with the computer system right now. So we're doing this old school, doing it. It's just you and me. There's no crazy automation happening at the same time. There's no fancy production. You and me hanging out here talking cars on the radio. Shame on the producer, by the way, which in this case is also me. I am producing my own show today. Oh man! But I was making this awesome point when I got cut off by the news break, which was that we have made internal combustion engines so incredibly efficient now. The marvel of technology that has existed, that has happened, over the past 100 years is truly spectacular, and we should be able to appreciate that. And we really ought to, just because there's a government saying, you have to subsidize this technology and focus on that. Does it always mean that it's the right solution? And no, I don't think it always does. So anyway, there are my thoughts on that right there. And of course, we're dealing with some live radio today. I do love it, by the way.